What's going on, everybody? Welcome into week 4 of College Football Roundup. I am your co host, American Football Network, joined along with the football expert. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to both of our channels. Help us hit our goals. Subscribe to College Football Roundup. Help us hit that goal of 50 subscribers by the end of September. We do weekly college football streams as well as our College Football Roundup podcast series that we do with our Pick'em contest. So, good week for you last week. Solid week for me. You went 14-6. I went 12-8. We lost a few close ones in
Yep.
there, and then so that bumps our records up. I am 43-17 heading into week 4. You are 44-16 heading into week 4. So some good records there. So what are your thoughts on just kind of a little recap of last week, and what are your thoughts going into this week?
I think that the biggest thing about last week that I have to take away is that this college football season, there is the most parity I think there has been in decades and definitely in our lifetimes. I think that the parity is just unparalleled. I think that you have an Alabama team that is just flailing, which is something that you've never seen before in our lifetimes. Well, outside of our cognitive lifetimes, like since Nick Saban has gotten there. Um, and I think that the overall structure, Georgia is not like high tier leveled as they have been in the past. Like they have struggles. Texas has struggles. Um, Michigan finally gets their coach back in Jim Harbaugh. So I think that the biggest recap I have is that this season is going to be a season of parity, and I don't see any 2018 Clemson, 2019 LSU, 2001 Miami, or 2011. I think it was 11 Florida State, or 2012 Bama, or stuff like that. I don't see a team like that.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think that whenever we get to the end of the season, we may only have one undefeated team, and that be either Michigan or Ohio State. Because
Or
I
Notre
just
Dame.
or Notre Dame, yeah, yeah.
If
Um,
it like in the sense that like Notre Dame can beat Ohio State in that possibility, and I yeah.
but I mean, you look at the Pac-12; they're looking great so far, but they're getting into that time of the season where they're going to start beating up on each other. You look at them this week; they got UCLA and Utah, and they got Oregon State, Washington State. All four of those teams are ranked. All of them are Oregon State and Utah are in the top. Utah's top 15. Oregon State's just outside of it, and then UCLA's at 24, and I believe Washington State's at 23. So I mean, you look now; they're already about to start beating up on each other. I think that they will. Um, oh, and you also have Colorado and Oregon from the Pac-12 too. I forgot about that one. That one is a
Yep.
top 20 matchup. So three top 25 matchups in the Pac-12 this week. They're going to beat up on each other. Then later on in the season, you got Utah versus Washington, Washington versus Oregon, Washington versus USC, USC versus Utah, USC versus Oregon. Those teams are going to beat up on each other. I don't think any one of them is good enough to come away unbeaten, except maybe Washington. I think Washington's the team I put the most trust into um, early on in this season, is because they're the only team that has really just completely shut teams down and dominated them the way that they're
Yeah,
supposed to. I mean,
and
USC has won pretty dominantly against these teams, but they've given up some points and allowed it to be close with some teams that had no business keeping it close with them, and that defense is just a huge question for me.
yeah, and one thing that I would say, another takeaway that I have is that the SEC is firmly the third or fourth best conference. They are not in the top two. They are not even in the top two this year. It's just plain and simple. Like you can't even make an argument to me, in my opinion, you can't make an argument saying that they are a top 10 team. You just can't, are not a top 10 team. You can't make an argument that they're the top two conferences. I think that the Pac 12 is pretty clearly number one. I think that the Big 12 or Big 10 is clearly number two. And I think you could argue the SEC kind of in there, but I personally would put the SEC as the fourth best conference in football.
Here's another thing too: can you really put them above the ACC? considering the way the ACC just completely has dominated them this season.
Kind
Like
of in the
every
fact that
matchup for the most part, they have dominated them.
yeah, well, here's the only problem with that I have with that. Like I generally, yes, I agree with you, but the only problem I have is that I think with this particular season, I think that the ACC with a down Clemson just doesn't have the general top tier level. Like you needed a Clemson to be good. You just did. So, like, I think you need Clemson to be a good team in order to really qualify. Because outside of Florida State, who, like, you have North Carolina, but how good is North Carolina?
Well, I mean, so far North Carolina has beaten an SEC team. You look at, I believe, who else was it that won? Florida State beat LSU, and they beat LSU pretty bad. Who early on in the season is actually looking like the SEC's best team. Them and Ole Miss
Yeah.
are looking
Mhm.
like the best two teams out of the ACC, and I hate to see it, but people are already forgetting. It's been 2 games past, and people are already forgetting about Florida State's beatdown of LSU 45-24. People are already forgetting that. They beat them by 3 touchdowns, and people are already acting like it doesn't matter and talking about LSU to the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Whereas,
it's
whereas
it's
had it
the
been
SEC.
now, LSU can take the loss better than Florida State could have taken it. But had Florida State been blown out like this, I guarantee you Florida State is not ranked number 12 in the country going into week 4. And I guarantee you that Florida State is not being talked about as potentially making the playoff again, the way
Yeah.
that LSU is. Um, so I
Yeah.
mean, you hate to see it, but it'll all work itself out. It doesn't really matter what these people think right now. Um, it'll all it'll all figure itself out. But let's go ahead and get into the pick 'em for this week. So our first game, I believe this is a Friday game. Wisconsin at Purdue. Who do you got in this one? And what are your thoughts on this game?
Very reluctantly, I got the Badgers. I think that the Badgers have played pretty poorly this season, and I took Washington State to win that game. Like, I didn't think that the Badgers were ready, but I just don't think Purdue is either, and I'm going to go with Wisconsin to kind of play a little bit better. I think a lot of people in the offseason very much overrated Wisconsin, and I was I can't say that I'd probably have overrated them a little bit, but I was a little bit more mild on them. And Wisconsin has even kind of disappointed my expectations that they really did not play well against Washington State, not good games against Buffalo and stuff like that. I'm going to go with the Badgers, but it's with with a lot of reluctance almost.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going with Wisconsin now. I was one of those people. I was a little bit higher on Wisconsin than you were. I expected Mordecai to play solid, but so far he has looked. I mean, he's looked pretty bad.
Yeah.
He's looked pretty
Mhm.
bad. He's had some nice plays here and there, but overall he has looked pretty bad. And
Well, guess
so
who's looked better? Graham
what's
Mertz
that?
has looked. Graham
Oh,
Mertz has looked better.
yeah, Graham Mertz is looking a lot better with Billy Napier. Now, he's still not looking like a 5-star quarterback
No.
like he was out of high school, but
Mhm.
he's looking better than he was with Wisconsin. Um, I didn't expect Mordecai to have a big year like a lot of Wisconsin fans were because they just don't have the receivers. It doesn't matter what quarterback you put there; they're not going to have a huge year passing because Wisconsin just doesn't have the receivers to do that. I mean, you put a guy like Drake May at Wisconsin, he's going to do a lot better than Tanner Mordecai, but he's still not throwing for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns.
No.
They just don't have the talent on the outside, which is something that Fickle will build. And I agree with you. I don't think either one of these two teams are ready, but when it comes down to a close game at the end, I trust Luke Fickle to come away with the win.
Yeah.
So
So,
moving
or go
on
ahead.
to the next game, we got NC State at Virginia. Who you taking in this one?
With this game, I'm going to go with the Wolfpack. I think that the Wolfpack. I think Brennan Armstrong is probably going to play well in this game. I think he has a lot to prove. But here's the thing: Virginia also played well last week. Like, there was no doubt that Virginia was in that game against Maryland a lot longer than I thought. Obviously, the final score does not suggest that. But this game was, I think, tied up at halftime, or maybe it was 21-14 Maryland. Um,
It was
but
14-14 all the way until like under 10 minutes to go in the third, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. So Virginia did play better than I expected, and Brennan Armstrong hasn't looked great. But at the same time, I just think that NC State's defense is too good. I think that Tony Gibson and that defense with the exotic blitzes and stuff like that, it's just too good for a Virginia team that continues to struggle.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm going with NC State in this game. I just think that you know they have a better defense. I think even as bad as Armstrong has looked and as shaky as he's looked at times, he's obviously still the best quarterback in this matchup. And NC State just has more weapons and more pieces offensively, as well as when it comes down to it, Dave Doran is a better football coach than Tony Elliott is. And if all else fails, that will be the difference in the football game is Dave Doran's coaching against Tony Elliott's coaching. So I have a win for the Wolfpack. Next up, we got Auburn at Texas A&M. Who you got in this one?
This one, it is going to be the Auburn Tigers. I think that Auburn has looked okay, and this is kind of more of a gut feeling that I just think that you're going to get a good performance from Hugh Freeze and Peyton Thorne and stuff like that, more than the fact that Texas A&M is worse or stuff like that. It's kind of more of just like, okay, I think Auburn can get a win here, more than I know Auburn's going to get a win here, but it's going to be a close matchup.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's going to be close. The one thing I worry about is when Auburn went to play Cal, the final score of that game was 14-10. I
Yeah.
have a hard time seeing them holding A&M. Obviously, A&M I feel like has a better offense and honestly probably a little bit of a better defense than Cal does. You look at the Miami game, they gave up 48, but they still scored 33 on a Miami defense that I think is probably better than Auburn's. Um, you look at these games and A&M's put up some big numbers: 52 against New Mexico, 47 against Louisiana Monroe. Now I know Auburn's done the same offensively: 59 against UMass and 45 against Sanford, but they've also given up 14 and 13, which I will say I didn't watch the games. That could have been just late scores, but if this game was at Auburn, I'm picking Auburn to win it. But with this game at Texas A&M, I feel like A&M is a little bit of a better football team, and they don't have to worry about a road atmosphere. I'm going to take the Aggies to win this one. Next up, we got a big Pac-12 matchup, like we were talking about earlier. UCLA at Utah. What are your thoughts on this one, and who you got?
This is a game that I've gone back and forth on, and honestly, it kind of depends on whether Cam Rising plays. Like, I think if UCLA, they've looked good. They've looked good. And Utah, they've struggled in certain parts. If Cam Rising plays, it's a game I've gone back and forth on, and right now I technically have Utah down as a winner, but I think I'm going to go with an upset. I think I'm going to go with the Bruins to get the W here. I'm going to have another game of disagreement with you and extend my lead here. So I'm going to go with the Bruins with the victory.
Yeah, we'll see about extending the lead there, but yeah, I think that Utah is just it's at Utah. That is one of the toughest places to go and to win. You look at defensively, Utah's defense is outstanding. That hasn't been a problem for them all season. You look at the quarterback position, it's likely Cam Rising plays, but not it's obviously not guaranteed that he's going to play, but it's likely that he's going to start. Even if he doesn't start, I think that obviously Utah has shown that they can still win without him. They've won 3 straight without him. So I'm going to go with Utah here, but it is going to be a closer game, regardless of Rising playing or not. It's going to be a closer football game at Utah, but I just don't see UCLA, especially with a young true freshman quarterback on the road, being able to come away with a win at Utah in a close game. Next up, we got Colorado at Oregon. What are your thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
Oregon, and it's going to be probably by a mile. I think that The Colorado State game took a lot out of Colorado, and obviously now you don't have Travis Hunter, by far and away your best player. I just have major concerns when it comes to this Utah team that I thought the offensive line and defensive line looked good against TCU, and it did, but it seems to now be struggling a little bit. And the Dylan Edwards that we saw in that first game doesn't seem to be getting the holes in the burst that he had in the first game against TCU. And obviously, this partially because TCU's defense is weak. I just don't see Colorado getting a good game here. I think that Oregon wins and probably by 2+ touchdowns. I don't know if they cover the spread of 21, but we'll see.
I agree. I think Oregon wins anywhere from 14 to 28 points. I think it's going to be a blowout. You look at Colorado, the offensive line for Colorado, like you talked about the lines, the offensive line is not good at all. By far the weakest position on that football team. Now they do a nice job scheming with Shador Sanders getting the ball out quick, so not really getting it. But we saw last week against Colorado State when those guys are covered, he's going to get pressured and he's going to get sacked a lot. I think Colorado State had 5 or 6 sacks in the game. I know Kamara had 2 or 3 for him. You cannot look at this Oregon defensive line and tell me that they are not a much better defensive line than what Colorado State's defensive line was going into that game. So, and there's no way Colorado's offensive line is going to be that improved coming in just a week. I think Oregon's going to get a lot of pressure on Sanders. I think he's going to be running around all game. And like you mentioned, they're without Travis Hunter, their best player on not just offensively or not just defensively, but their best player on both sides of the ball. And they're going to be without him. And I think Oregon's going to bully them at the trenches. And I think Oregon's an underrated team, too. I think a lot of people have been sleeping on them because they did lose a lot of starters last year. But I think Oregon's gonna really shut down this Colorado hype and blow them out. Next up, we got Duke at UConn. What are your thoughts on this game and who are you taking?
I'm still a little bit salty about UConn kind of leaving me out to dry with the NC State game. So I'm picking Duke. Plus, I think Duke's the better team. They have offensive capabilities. When it comes to UConn, I'm very concerned about their ability to score some points. They did at the end of last year, and I thought that was going to continue. But offensively, I think they've kind of struggled a little bit when it comes to scoring points. So I just can't go with the Huskies, as you lost to FIU last week, losing your third game in a row. Duke is a much better team. UConn is far worse than what I expected them to be honest.
Oh yeah, for sure. I thought UConn was going to be a little bit better. I wasn't quite as high on them as you were, but at the end of the day, Duke is the better football team. They have the better offense, the better defense, the better quarterback, probably the better football coach, and Duke's going to get the win here, regardless of it being at UConn. That doesn't matter. Duke's going to go up there, and they're going to win. I would say by at least 2 touchdowns. Next up, we got Maryland at Michigan State. Thoughts on this one? And who do you have?
Mel Tucker is gone, and Michigan State's student section is gone, and I don't know if the football team will be done after this week, but Maryland will get a win and get a pretty easy opening conference win, as Michigan State may be the worst team in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I think Michigan State may be the worst team. They were already a pretty bad team, lost a lot. Then you add in the fact that now they have their head coach who is going through all this stuff. That I saw something on ESPN yesterday that Michigan State's informed them that they plan to fire him. So Mel Tucker's gone. Maryland's going to get the win here. They've shown some sort of offense this season. Michigan State is not, and I think that's really the difference. The difference to me, and the fact that Maryland has a stable coaching staff right now. Michigan State doesn't, so I'm going with Maryland. Next up, we got BYU at Kansas. BYU pulled off an upset last week against Arkansas. Can they do it again?
The answer is probably not. I was a little bit concerned with Kansas's performance last week against Nevada. Jalen Daniels did not play fantastic. So it does concern me a little bit going into this game, but it is a home game for Kansas. I think that Kansas gets a crowd out, and I think that even though it's not a super intimidating environment, at least you don't have to go play in Provo, which is kind of weird environment in and of itself. So I am going to go with the Jayhawks, but kind of with a little bit of reluctance there.
Yeah, I agree. They played kind of a little bit shaky against Nevada. I think they only beat them by
7.
what was, yeah, 7 against a bad Nevada team who's probably one of the worst teams in the Mountain West, if not the worst. Um, and BYU coming off a big game, a big win at Arkansas. I'm gonna go with Kansas here, but it's not one that I'm uh, extremely confident in. Um, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to disagree with you on one. I'm going with BYU. I feel like that they're going to pull it off for a second week in a row. Slovis has actually looked good with them. Um, and their tight end, I'm blanking on his name. He's going to be a problem again in this game. Had a big game against Arkansas. He's going to be a problem in this game. Give me BYU over the Kansas Jayhawks. Next up, we got Texas Tech at West Virginia. What are your thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
Texas Tech, but I will give this Neil Brown a little bit of credit. He has performed a little bit better than I expected him to. They looked solid against Pitt, but that also may be saying not a lot because Pitt may be a really, really bad team this year, way worse than anybody expected. So I think that Texas Tech gets a pretty easy road win here.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going with Texas Tech. I just think that they're the better team, more offensively capable of scoring than West Virginia is, especially if Garrett Green is out. I didn't continue watching. I didn't watch much of the backyard brawl. I just saw that he was out. Honestly, I haven't cared to really look up if he's going to be playing or not. I don't think West Virginia is a team to really keep up with a whole lot. Um, but either
Don't
way,
tell
Texas Tech.
Anthony.
Yeah, yeah. But either way, Texas Tech going to put some points up, and they're going to win this game by at least 2 touchdowns, I would imagine. But next up, we got Georgia Tech at Wake Forest. What are your thoughts, and who are you taking in that one?
Brent Key has done a good job with this program, but unfortunately, it has been a tough start, and it's not really his own fault. Like the schedule is it's a tough schedule. You have to play against Louisville, you have to play against Ole Miss. So I think Georgia Tech gets back over 500. And I think Georgia Tech does get the win here and gets a good win going into true conference play here.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think that Georgia Tech is gonna win this football game. I think that you look at the way that Wake Forest played against Old Dominion last week and the way Georgia Tech played against Ole Miss. Georgia Tech actually surprised people in how much better they played against a very good Ole Miss team, especially an Ole Miss team that has come a long way defensively over the last 2 years. And Wake Forest just played so bad against Old Dominion. They played awful, barely were able to come away with the win. So I think that Georgia Tech gets the win. I think they're in a better spot than Wake Forest is. Wake Forest obviously has the better record. It's a home game for them, but I think Georgia Tech and Brent Key are going to get the win, and they're going to move to what 2-2 on the season now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next up, we got Arkansas at LSU. Thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
LSU will get the boot once again. I think LSU is playing mad, and I think Arkansas is struggling as a program, and I think Sam Pittman may be more towards the heading on the way out.
Yeah, Pittman, man, he had it going for a while, and just somewhat last year and now this year they've just been spiraling. It's not looking good. He had a very good roster, and now he's having a tough time replacing some of those guys through recruiting and in the transfer portal. I think Arkansas is in a tough spot right now. I think, like you said, LSU's playing mad. They're playing out for revenge. I think LSU smokes them. I think they beat them by 20. Next up, we got Oregon State at Washington State. Thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
It's a close one, and to be honest, I want to. Here's the thing. I want to pick Oregon State. I really do. But it's at Washington State, and I am so mixed on this game. Like, honestly, I I'm going back and forth. Like, when I look at this game, just to put it into perspective of how I'm thinking about it, Oregon State has DJ. They played well, and they've looked good offensively. But at the same time, Washington State has also looked good offensively, and I like where Cameron Ward is at. This is a back and forth game for me, and it's a night game. It's on the road for Oregon State. But at the end of the day, I think I'm going to probably disagree with you, and I think I'm going to pick the Beavers in this game. I'm gonna pick your old nemesis in DJ Uyangula.
Okay, so go with the Beavers. I'm going with Washington State. I think it's a home game for them. Here's another thing. Oregon State hasn't played anybody all season long. Washington State's been in one of these close games whenever they played Wisconsin. I think that this team has been through that. I think they're better prepared for it. I think Oregon State's a good team, and I think this is going to be a close game for sure. But I like Washington State's ability that they've proven that they've already beaten a good team in Wisconsin, and I like Cam Ward as a quarterback a little bit better than DJ. DJ still showing some of the struggles that he had at Clemson, especially whenever you look last week. I believe he was like 18 of 29 for like 150 yards, a touchdown, a pick, something like that. So again, not great, and they're playing San Diego State, who's not a very good team right now. So I'm going with Washington State, like you said, home game. It's a night game. The atmosphere is going to be very good. But this is the battle of the Pac-12, if is what I guess you could call it now, or the Pac-2. These are the last two teams left in the Pac-12 that haven't been claimed, so they're going to want to show out and maybe get picked up by another conference.
Yeah,
But
the funny thing is that they're both ranked in the top 25, and this has got to be like it's got to be like the first time in like forever that both of them have been ranked in the top 25 together. Like
oh yeah,
since
because
the early 2000s.
Washington State was good a few years ago, for a little bit, but Oregon State was
Oregon
not.
State side. Yeah.
Yeah, and now Oregon State's been good. Washington State hasn't really, and now they're finally both ranked. We'll see who can pull off the win and continue to stay ranked. Because I'd imagine the loser of this game is probably going to be out of the polls.
Yeah, or if Oregon State loses, I doubt they drop 11s. I doubt they drop 12 spots. They are number 14.
They're number 14 now.
Yeah, they're all the way up at
I
14.
was thinking they were 16.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
they're number 14.
Yeah, Oregon State will probably drop back to the late 20s, or the later end of the top 25. But next up, we got potential upset alert. Texas at Baylor. Who do you have in this one?
You can't. I can't even explain how badly I want to pick Baylor in this matchup and give a big shout out to Scotty B. But at the same time, when I'm watching this game, I'm not going to be picking a team that very possibly could get blown out by 25 plus points. Like, I just honestly can't pick Baylor, even though I could see Baylor winning this. And I think, like I talked about, the parity between teams in college football is so close this year. But at the same time, I just can't pick pick Baylor without looking at this Texas team and just saying why. That's what I keep coming back to.
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a closer game. I don't think Baylor has it in them to pull off the upset at home. I don't think that they've played well enough. They've struggled against some bad teams, and then Texas rolls in. I think Texas's offense is going to be the difference in the game. I'm going with the Longhorns by 2 touchdowns or more. Next up, we got Iowa at Penn State. What are your thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
This is one of the games where we talk about nepotism and how bad it is at Iowa and why Penn State is much better than this Iowa team.
Yeah, Iowa just has no offense. I don't care how good the defense is. Penn State's offense is putting points on them. And if Penn State gets 14, 20 points, Iowa's done for. And I really don't trust Iowa's defense that much either. That last week at halftime they had given up 14 to Western Michigan and were or was like I think they were up 21-14 at the half or 20 to
Yeah,
14.
yeah.
Ended up blowing them out. But if you're giving up 14 points to Western Michigan and a half, Penn State's putting 35 on you in a game. They just are. That offense is very good, and your defense is going to have to play out of their mind to stop them. So I'm going with the Penn State Nittany Lions. Next up, we got Mississippi State at South Carolina. Thoughts on this one? And who are you taking?
South Carolina is good enough to beat the number one team in the country if they play a full game. That's kind of the takeaway I have with this game, is that South Carolina should win this game, and they should be able to compete, and they should be able to score points. But at the same time, it concerns me that South Carolina has continued to struggle to play two halves of football games. But this is going to be a night game at William Bryce, and I'm just going to have to go with the Gamecocks because I think that the night atmosphere and Mississippi State, they looked terrible last week. Again, it was against um, a mad LSU team, but at the same time, I got to go with the Gamecocks.
Oh yeah, I'm going with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I think this is going to be a closer game, but that South Carolina offensive line is one of the worst in college football. It is awful. Then you look at the receiving core for South Carolina. It will really the only offensive weapon they have right now coming into this game, Xavier Leggett. With Juice Wells injured, probably not gonna be here for this game. Definitely not 100%. If he does play, then I think South Carolina is going to have a hard time. I think Miss State is going to have a a very good bounce back offensive game. I think that Rogers is going to play much better in that game. And I think that Mississippi State pulls off the win. It'll be a closer one for sure, but I think they come away with a win. Next up, we got UCF at Kansas State. Thoughts on this one and who you got?
Kansas State, but I was very disappointed in how they played last week. I think everybody kind of was. Obviously, you lost on a tough 61-yard field goal. And
In the
obviously, that's,
rain. In the
yeah,
rain.
yeah. And like that's a tough way to lose, but at the same time, when you're looking at it, I think that you still have to go with Kansas State because I think that they're just a better team, and I think that they'll take a bounce back game here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Kansas State is the better team. It's a home game for them. It's UCF's first Big 12 game, correct?
Yeah, that
Um,
is. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, their first Big 12 game. So I think that's got just added pressure to this UCF team. I think Kansas State. Now, I'm interested to see what Will Howard's health looks like because he was limping around and in a lot of pain. Obviously, was affecting his throwing at the end of that game against Missouri. So I want to know what his health is. I think regardless, Kansas State can win the football game, but I do think that it will be a lot closer if he's not 100%. Next
Oh
up, we
yeah.
got North Carolina at Pitt. Thoughts on this one and who are you taking?
Pitt is bad. Like I said earlier on, when they've looked bad against Cincinnati, they've looked bad against West Virginia, and those are two teams that are going to be no more towards the bottom of the Big 12. This Pitt team is bad. North Carolina's going to put up points, and I honestly could see like a 30 plus point blowout because I don't think North Carolina's defense is going to give up this many points to a bad Pitt offense.
No, yeah, I mean, South Carolina's offense was bad week one. North Carolina gave up 17 to them. This Pitt offense is even worse. I think that the Pitt score, I think 17 is the most this Pitt offense can score, if that. And I think North Carolina is going to hang 40 on them. I think they're going to absolutely just blow them out. And North Carolina has played a lot differently this year than they have in past years. past years, these games have been shootouts, but they've actually played very good defense so far through this game, or through this season. They, 31-17 win against South Carolina, 31-13 win last week against Minnesota. So they've beaten some good teams, but they've also shown that offensively they can win the game in those shootouts or close games when the defense isn't working, and they proved that against App State in week 2 whenever they won in overtime 30. I forget the exact score on that one, but winning that game in overtime, they showed that when the defense isn't necessarily working and making plays and helping us win the game, the offense can in those tight games. And Drake May showed he could do it. So I have a lot of confidence for this North Carolina team, not just in this game, but just in this season. I think that they're definitely a much improved team than what they were. But now we are to our big 3 games. So the first one, Florida State at Clemson. Thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
With this game, I'm going to go with the Seminoles. I just that this Clemson team has looked terrible offensively in most of the season. It looked much better in the past 6 quarters, but at the same time, those are against terrible defenses and stuff like that. And I think that K just will. He continues to struggle, I think, against some exotic blitzes and stuff like that. And I just think with the inexperience, I think that you will continue to see struggles from Clemson. I could see a 2-touchdown victory here from the Seminoles.
Yeah, I agree. I think Clemson's offense really struggled in the first 6 quarters of the season, but in the last 6, they've looked much better, which I've heard is because Dabo Sweeney was calling plays during the Duke game and for the first half of the Charleston Southern game. And now Lincoln Riley, or Garrett, not Lincoln Riley, Garrett Riley is calling plays, has been calling plays the last 6 quarters. So if that's true, maybe that's maybe that would have been the difference in the Duke game, because I know the offense turned the ball over and played terrible, but even the play calling in the Duke game was just awful. Even when they were driving the ball down the field, the play calling was awful. It was just painful to watch. So we'll see what happens in this football game. I think that this is going to be definitely a hard fought, closer game for at least 2.5, 3 quarters. I think the fourth quarter is what's going to determine what kind of game this is. I think one of two things are either going to happen. Either Florida State's going to pull away and win by, at least 10 in the game, probably more like 14 plus, or Clemson's going to win a very close game and find a way to get it done. And I don't really know which one it's going to be, because I think Florida State, I think if this game is close, Florida State's not going to be able to pull out a close one like they did against Boston College. I don't think that Florida State is going to be able to win a close game in Death Valley. But I think that they could definitely blow Clemson out in Death Valley. And some things to watch from last week. One, that game took a lot out of them for sure. That the game for Clemson last week against Florida Atlantic didn't really take much out of them, but Florida State, that was a hard fought game last week, but they didn't lose, so it's not like they're going to be necessarily out for revenge, but it was a game that took a lot out of them. You look at Jordan Travis, he actually got banged up in that game right before halftime. Now he came back out, but that's something to monitor. How healthy is he? He looked pretty good in the second half, but you could tell it was a little bit of a nagging injury to him. He didn't look fully 100%. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, I'm going with Florida State. I trust them offensively, and I trust Jordan Travis more than I trust Clemson's offense and Cade Klubnik. So I'm going with Florida State. I think this is going to be a hard fought battle, but we'll see what ends up happening with it. Next up, we got Ole Miss at Alabama. Who you got in this one, and why?
I think that when you look at this game, I think that you finally see the student become the master over the teacher. I think that Nick Saban over the past couple of years has kind of lost his reign of dominance over his assistants, losing to Kirby Smart, losing to Jimbo Fisher. I think that Lane Kiffin kind of continues the trend, and I think that you have some issues there, and you even have Steve Sarkisian to add to that list as well. I forgot about him. But I think that list kind of continues to expand, and I think Ole Miss has some struggles of their own. Defensively, they have some issues, but I think Ole Miss is in a good spot offensively. Plus, this game is being played at Ole Miss, right? It's in.
No, at Alabama.
Oh, it's in Alabama. Well, either way, I here's my thing: is that I just don't trust Alabama. I think that they'll do a better job at the quarterback position, but at the same time, I also don't trust Tommy Reese particularly. That's my other issue is that I like Tommy Reese. He struggled in some of these games, and I think that that has to be recognized as well.
Oh yeah, I don't trust this Alabama offense at all. You talked about Ole Miss's weaknesses at defense. Yeah, they do have a weakness at defense, but their defense is definitely better than South Florida's defense, who held Alabama to 17 points. Their offense is also much better than South Florida's offense. And they're going back to Milrow. How good is he going to be though? They already killed his confidence by benching him after the Texas game when he didn't really play that bad.
No, he
He
didn't.
had a few bad passes, a few. I think he had a bad interception, but he also had a few really good plays that he made for him. So I just don't know what he's going to be after they killed his confidence like that. All three or four of their quarterbacks, I forget how many they played last week, were awful. All of them were. Um, Now the defense looks solid still, but I think Jackson Dart and this Ole Miss defense offense are going to have a field day against Bama's defense, and I think that Ole Miss is going to beat them by 14. Next up, we got Ohio State at Notre Dame. Thoughts on this one, and who are you taking?
Well, I think you know who I'm taking, and I think everybody in the audience knows who I'm taking. I'm taking the Irish. If you watch my prediction video, go. If you have not, go ahead and go watch it. That's my in-depth analysis. But to kind of keep it more short and sweet here, Notre Dame, put simply, whether Ohio State fans like it or not, has the better quarterback, has the better offense, has the better offensive line, and defensively, when it comes down to it, has the better defense as well, in my opinion. I think that that point can be argued. Um, but when you're looking at this, yeah, sure, Ohio State's wide receivers are really good. And their offense, when you're looking at it, they have good wide receivers, but at the same time, it also means that Kyle McCord has to make the passes to be able to get to the Marvin Harrisons and the Emeka Bukas and stuff like you just have to get the ball there, and I don't fully trust Kyle McCord to do that. And no matter how hard it is for Ohio State fans to get that through their head, I just simply cannot look at this team and see anything but a disappointment when it comes to I think Ohio State fans are very delusional and up in the clouds because, and I say this because of the comments that I've received in my videos, that Ohio State is just fine and that the week one struggles against Indiana mean nothing. Yeah, it was week one and stuff like that, but then at the same time, Notre Dame didn't have those struggles. Notre Dame has looked good all throughout this season, and other than in the first quarter and a half against NC State, where it took them a minute to adjust to the defenses and exotic blitzes that Tony Gibson was throwing at them. I think that this team at Notre Dame just simply is going to win in the trenches. I think that Ohio State has some good defensive linemen, but I just think that Notre Dame's offensive line is better, and I just think that Notre Dame is in a better position when it comes down to it. And I think that Ohio State fans, I'm happy to see it come Saturday if they want to come to the live stream and cry about how badly their team is getting beat and stuff like that. I'm not saying that this game's going to be a blowout, but I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at this game's result at the end of it.
Yeah, I'm just not buying any of that. Notre Dame, the game was 24-17 against NC State well into the fourth quarter. They struggled in that game. Now I know that was a weirder game. You have the lightning delay and the big weather delay, but you still struggled a lot in that football game. I think the way Ohio State played last week, um, they they have had their early season struggles, but they've also played teams a lot better than what Notre Dame's played. Other than NC State's obviously the best team, but and Notre Dame struggled against them, but some of those other teams like Indiana's better than Navy, they're better than Tennessee State, they're better than Central Michigan. Um, so I just
But
think that Ohio
here's the
State.
problem with that, or here's the problem with that argument is, yeah, sure, Indiana is the second best team, but the third best team is Navy out of all of them, and I would say the fourth best team is probably Central Michigan. Out of the teams that have been played, I think that Navy is the third best and Central Michigan's the fourth best. Is that right?
I mean, I would say probably so, but Ohio State hasn't really struggled against other teams, really.
Well, they
So
struggled against Youngstown State. They were only winning 21-7 going into halftime.
but they ended up pulling away in the second. They struggled for a
Well,
half to
yeah,
get
but no, you
to
can make
beat
the
them in the
same
second
argument
half.
when you talk about NC State because it wasn't well into the fourth quarter. Notre Dame had a 2-touchdown lead the entire fourth quarter after 2 minutes in, and then they extended that all the way up to 28 points. And to be honest, one of the touchdown drives that NC State got was because the refs made a bunch of dumb calls. And if you want to,
Here
I'm
we
not
go. The refs, the
the
refs, the
refs,
refs,
I'm saying
the
Notre
refs,
Dame
the refs, the
handled what they
refs.
needed to, but the game was not going to be as close as if you look at some of the calls were just simply dumb. Notre Dame overcame that, and it wasn't a close game. It was a 21-point game, and NC State got a late touchdown that made it to 21 points. It was a 28-point game when Notre Dame pulled their starters, and that was with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So it was not a close game. Like, it was a tough battle that was throughout the time. But this game, that's what good teams do, is they pull it out. And that's something that Ohio State has kind of done. But at the same time, when you're looking at it, Ohio State fans, and even you, I think, have neglected to remind yourselves that Sam Hartman is the best quarterback on the field, and it's not even close.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think that at the same time, whenever you look at it, Kyle McCord is not too far behind him. You look at the receivers, Ohio State. Ohio State has the better offense. Notre Dame has the better offensive line and the better quarterback. But Ohio State isn't far behind in either of those categories. They have the better receivers by a mile, and their running backs are slightly better as well.
I'm gonna I'm
That's
gonna
just the
disagree
fact
on
of it.
running
I
back.
know you're going to disagree because you're a Notre Dame homer, and
A
you think
Notre
your
Dame
team's
homer.
winning the
This has
national
nothing to.
championship every year.
This
But
is, I have not
this
predicted Notre Dame to win a
it's
national
not going to happen.
championship in a year.
You have had them in the playoffs for forever. Every single year
That's
you've had
different.
them
That
in
you
the
said winning a
playoffs.
national championship, and I was right. 2 out of the 3 years that I've had them in the playoffs, and then this year I also have in the playoffs. 2 out of 3 years, I was right.
Whatever you wanna go with, but
You okay?
I mean,
Whatever I want to go with
are
it.
you gonna let me talk and explain what I
Go
think, or
ahead.
do you want to
Go
just do
ahead.
the show yourself?
Go ahead.
When you look at defensively, Notre Dame's defensive line is not going to get anything on offense on Ohio State's offensive line. They're just not. Ohio State has the better defensive line. They have the better linebackers. The only spot defensively, whenever you compare these teams, that Notre Dame is better is in the secondary, which obviously helps Ohio State. But the this Ohio State team is going to put up a lot of points on this Notre Dame team, and I think Notre Dame can also put up some points, but I think at the end of the day that they're going to get outscored by Ohio State, and Notre Dame can't score as quickly and as often as Ohio State can. Notre Dame, they have shown a little bit of a quick strike ability, but it's definitely not the same. Their offense is not as electric as Ohio State is. Ohio State has two first round wide receivers, one that's going top 10, another one that could potentially go top 10, top 15, and even Fleming could potentially be a first round pick as well. So
Link.
I mean, this Ohio State offense is much more talented than this Notre Dame offense. Yes, you have the better quarterback, but when you look at skill position and offensive weapons, Notre Dame lacks that compared to Ohio State.
Well, here's the thing that I will say is this, is I think that you're completely wrong and to a degree ignorant that Notre Dame is not an explosive offense. Notre Dame has 7 plays over 50 or over 40 yards this season already, which is more than Ohio State. Notre Dame has big run plays, big pass plays. You obviously have explosive quick strike ability, and I'm sorry, but that's just dead wrong. Like, Notre Dame has the ability. If you wanted
I
to
didn't
say
say Notre
last
Dame
year,
was not an explosive offense.
Notre Dame is a more
Is
explosive
is
offense than
Notre
Ohio State
Notre
is. It is.
Does Notre Dame in this game have a better shot of, with what they have, of scoring a 75-yard touchdown on one play than what Ohio State has? The answer is no.
The answer is yes.
Ohio State by far has the most electric players on their
Okay,
team.
here's the thing. Okay, let's also take it with this. Ohio State, you know what they're going to do. They're not Notre Dame defensively is going to cover to the crap out of this game. They're not going to
And
let
Ohio
anything
State
go
will
over
run
the
for
top of them.
350 yards and 5 touchdowns on
No,
you if
they
you do that.
won't. They just simply won't. They don't have the bodies. And Notre Dame's linebacking core, I think that you forget to mention, it is the one of the most experienced linebacking cores in the entire country, with guys like J.D. Bertrand and Maris Luafau and stuff like that, and even Jack Kaiser. These are all senior linebackers, and two of them are fifth-year seniors. This is an experienced linebacking core, and it may not be the most talented, but it is definitely an extremely good linebacking core, and I would agree with you. Ohio State has the edge if J.D. Bertrand isn't playing, but J.D. Bertrand is playing, and he is fully healthy. Coming out after that game, you're looking at a Notre Dame team that I just simply think that you're saying that they have a small edge at quarterback. That's just not true. Sam Hartman is a better quarterback. It's just plain and simple. And it's not really that close, because you can't say without just massively projecting Kyle McCord that Kyle McCord doesn't have the experience or the wherewithal in these big games that even Sam Hartman does. Like, he doesn't have the big game experience. He doesn't have the big game stats. He doesn't have even the stats generally, or the experience generally, excluding just big games. You're looking at a quarterback that I don't know what to think of him, and I don't think you honestly know what to think of him in a big game situation where he's actually playing a good secondary, in which Notre Dame's secondary, in my opinion, I think you would probably agree, is a top 5 secondary in the country.
It's debatable. It's definitely top 10, but this is the best. This is an NFL receiving core they're going to be going up against, and
And guess what happened last year?
these guys are going to show out, and they're going to make some plays. Yeah, guess what happened last year? They lost their best receiver in the first quarter, and none of these other guys had really stepped up and proven anything. Marvin Harrison Jr. Coming into week 1 last year was a redshirt freshman, had barely played anything. Fleming's a senior, but Emeka Egbuka, redshirt freshman, barely played.
I
So
also
yeah,
understand that,
you
but
lost
Benjamin
your best
Morrison is
receiver. You lost your best receiver, and these guys had not broken out and played and really had the chance to play like they did now. If you have Marvin Harrison Jr. that was in that Georgia game, and you put him back into the Notre Dame game week 1, Ohio State puts up 40 something points on you.
I just disagree in this sense. I think that Benjamin Morrison is the best cornerback in college football, and you can agree or disagree with me. I don't really care. Benjamin Morrison is probably going to be put one-on-one with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I don't think he'll win every single rep, but I think he'll win more than most people expect, because I think Benjamin Morrison is a top 10 cornerback when he comes out of the draft next year. No, in 2 years, I guess, when he's a junior.
Yeah, I'm not debating that, but you also can't ignore the fact Marvin Harrison Jr. is an NFL caliber player right this minute.
He is. He is. I don't disagree with you. He's a top 5
And
draft pick next year.
there is nobody on that team that is going to be able to consistently cover him for a full game.
I disagree. I think
There
that
will be
Benjamin Morrison
plays.
can. I just think
There will
Benjamin
be
Morrison can.
plays. There will be plays where Marvin Harrison Jr. gets behind that defense and he's open for a touchdown. Now, whether McCord can hit him or not, we'll see, because I think that yes, he has had some struggles throughout the season so far, but he's going to have time to throw the football, because Notre Dame's not going to get a lot of pressure. They haven't gotten a lot of pressure even against NC State. They didn't get a ton of pressure in the game. They got, more. They did get a good amount, but it wasn't a lot. And this Ohio State offensive line is better than
I
that.
don't know if they're
And
that much better. Like, they're better, but they're also inexperienced. It's a new left tackle, it's a new right tackle, and it's a new left guard, and two of them are freshmen. Like, it's not an experienced unit either.
but they've played good all season long. I know they're going
Yeah,
to be
against
playing a
Indiana,
different
Western
team.
Michigan, and
I know
Youngstown
they're going to be
State.
playing a different team, but it's not like Notre Dame's defensive line is some powerhouse defensive
No,
line
I'm not.
with
I'm not
NFL draft
saying
picks
that.
all over it. It's a very weak defensive line, and Ohio State is going to be able to get push on them. They have the running backs. Not only that, they have Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams, who if you want to play cover two and drop back and completely block the pass, go ahead, and they will run for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns on you with these two running backs. They
Here's the
will, because
problem: is
these are both NFL running backs.
Notre Dame has a good run defense. It's their issue is edge rushers, it's not particularly defensive tackles. They have good run defense overall. It's not an issue. Like you look against a team like Navy, and yes, it's triple option, but Notre Dame has consistently, whoever they've played this season, has been able to stop the run. There just hasn't been a lot of run game. And no doubt Ohio State has the best running backs out of anybody that Notre Dame's played. But at the same time, this run defense for Notre Dame, I think, is better than you'd expect. The pass rush is not it's not great. It's not. I'll agree with you on that. But I think run defense wise, they are a solid unit.
I think that bringing up anything with the Navy game is just completely irrelevant. Your average defensive lineman outweighed their average offensive lineman weight by like 40 pounds.
Yes, but you have to be able to stay disciplined and
Are you
stay
going to
in your
let me
depth.
finish? There was no way that they were going to get enough, that they were going to get any push. And even still, you look through in the first half, Navy ran the ball all over Notre Dame. They got whatever they wanted
No, they did not.
when they got down to the red zone. They couldn't finish drives off, but they ran all over you. They got
No, they
pushed.
did not.
They had a lot of they did. You're just completely ignoring the facts here. They
I am
got
not.
pushed, and they ran the ball very effectively on you in the first half of that game. You look
That's
at
just
this.
simply no.
That is a fact. Go back and watch the freaking game. Everybody that watched it will admit Navy ran the ball all over you in the first half effectively and got whatever they wanted to get.
No, they did not. They obviously did not. That's just simply not true in any regard. Notre Dame, obviously and consistently throughout the game, Navy's best. Navy averaged 3.5 yards a carry, dude. 3.5
For what?
For the game. They averaged 3.5 yards a carry.
Did I say the game?
They didn't average that much more in the first half. I don't know what their specific first half stats were, but they did not average that much more in the first half. Navy had 126 rushing yards the entire game. 126.
And they moved the ball down. They moved the ball down the field.
You cannot even say that you moved the ball down when you rush for 126 yards in a single game and you don't pass the ball.
They moved the ball down the field. You can't even debate that they didn't move the ball on you in the first half.
They moved the ball somewhat, but they obviously did not move it very well.
I'm not saying that they were down here in the red zone every single drive. It's Navy. But if Navy can run the ball on you like they did in the first half, what do you expect Ohio State to do?
Okay, well, I think we need to end this podcast because, well, we're at an hour. But thank you guys all for joining as well. Any closing thoughts here, Lincoln, before, we see everybody on Saturday?
No, I think this is going to be a great week of college football. I think that, that it's going to be a lot of great games at pretty much every time slot. Definitely want to have all the devices running on different games because there's going to be a lot to watch.
Make sure
it's going to be a great week.
Yeah, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button down below and like as well and check out both channels. And as always, have a great week.